right. Think of your typical online assignment. All right. Discussion of assigned readings, a unit essay or a short paper, a unit quiz or a test. I mean, pretty easy, pretty straightforward, not hard to explain. But think about some of those more complex online assignments, like an original research paper, an oral presentation, or a group project. And let me put you in charge of making sure that anybody new that comes in gets a handout. All right, thank you. Now, those complex online assignments bring about some complex challenges. For example, there's no face-to-face mentoring, no face-to-face guidance. They can't come into your office for office hours if they live 100 miles away. So you need written guidance, but written guidance takes longer to communicate and understand, and yet the semester is the same length as a face-to-face course. So what do? You got to make some complex choices. You've got to consider the objectives of your degree program. You've got to prioritize your learning outcomes. And then based on that, you need to provide written guidance, instructions in the syllabus, and for this talk, criteria in the grading rubric. Rubrics not only as scoring instruments, but also as guides for online students. So I'm going to give you 3 examples, and in homage to my Baptist upbringing, my sermon today has 3 alliterated points. We're going to look at a research paper, an oral presentation, and a group project. In fact, I've even got 3 alliterated subpoints, because in each one of these examples, we'll look at how you've got to gauge your program objectives, then prioritize your learning outcomes, and then based on that, provide the written guidance that's needed, including grading rubrics. So let's look at an original research paper. And I'm going to give you 2 examples. The first example is from a 3000 level organizational communication course, and that is my discipline. I'm an associate professor of communication at the University of Houston, Victoria. And in this particular assignment, students choose an organization to which they belong. It might be where they work, or it might be a community organization of which they're a member. They observe the processes of organizational culture in that organization, and then they write an original paper in 3 stages over the course of the semester. The second example is a 4000 level intercultural communication course where students observe a series of websites, and then they analyze how the narratives in these websites reflect dominant cultural values, and again they write a paper in 3 stages over the course of the semester. So for these original research papers, I look at the objectives of my communication program, which are 4, and they are: students should be able to describe major theories of communication, apply those theories to communication artifacts, learn to write in the communication discipline, and be able to articulate a theoretically informed personal communication philosophy. Now, the original research paper can get me at 3 of those objectives: describe major theories, apply the theories, learn to write in the communication discipline. And in our discipline, a typical research paper would be organized like this. I have my students write the first stage of the paper, title, abstract page, then the introduction, the literature review. The next stage, stage 2, they write the methods and results section. And then stage 3, the final stage, they write the discussion and conclusions section. But I got to prioritize my outcomes, okay? Because do I allow students to formulate their own research problem and their own argument or thesis to address that problem? But I found that students, at least at the undergraduate level, they struggle with that. And because written guidance in the online course for the complex assignment takes a while, there just isn't enough time for them to formulate their own problem and argument and still be able to write a paper. Or should I have them choose their own analytical framework? In a particular course like organizational communication or intercultural communication, we review a lot of different theories. So should I just give them carte blanche to pick any one they want? That too, I find that if I allow them to do that, I have to make a choice, because if they do that, there isn't going to be enough time to write the actual paper. And then the one that gave me the most angst is the last one, engaging the relevant literature. Boy, in a perfect world, I would love for my undergraduate students to be able to learn how to look up their own sources using electronic article databases. What I found is, for example, in my organizational communication course, when I let students do that, let's say they're observing a nonprofit organization. Well, they would do a word search and they would come up with lots of sources about nonprofit organizations, but nothing related to organizational communication. So I decided that what I've got to do is I've got to pre-screen and I've got to vet articles and upload them to Blackboard, because there just simply isn't enough time to do a complex project for them to both learn how to look at their own sources and actually write the paper. So I felt it was more important, rather than looking up the sources, to actually engage relevant literature related to the course topic. In these examples, organizational communication or intercultural communication. So what I do with these papers is, for the organizational communication course, I give them a choice of one of two problems and arguments. They can either look at their organization that they chose and how its culture forms through Trice and Byers' typology of organizational rituals, or Pakanowski and O'Donnell Trujillo's typology of organizational storytelling. Both typologies well established within the organizational communication discipline, and then I upload sources related to the two typologies. And that gives them time to write the paper. And also I had to make some choices with the intercultural communication course and the original research paper assignment. The websites that I have them look at, actually it's really interesting. I have them look at official websites associated with the Texas Revolution, and how that actually reflects the values of the dominant Texas culture. They analyze it through Hofstede's cultural value dimensions typology, again a very well-established framework, and I provide the sources. Now, looking at the first two pages on the handout that I gave, the front side of the first page is the rubric that I constructed for the organizational communication paper, and then on the back side, let's see, reverse side of page 1 is the rubric that I constructed for the intercultural communication paper. And remember, students don't get physical copies of these. They get these on the screen so they look nice and full size and easy to read. And I find that in constructing the rubric for the original research paper, that I've had to do it kind of with two things in mind, the sectional and the general. And so I provide them guidance into what sections your paper must have, what each section must cover, what are the minimum lengths in words for each section, and then with space for comments on each section. And then some of the general things that need to be in the rubric is, of course, what is the point value? What does, how do points relate to excellent, relate to good, relate to satisfactory, relate to poor? Also, any sourcing requirements that I might have. Writing requirements, good mechanics, well explained, clarity, and then also following APA style, which is the standard style in the communication discipline. Now, using this approach, I have found, and I have taught, let's see, I've taught since 2004 online courses, that this gives me faster and more objective grading. And why is that important? I mentioned at the outset that if you can't do the face-to-face mentoring, if you can't explain in person, then you've got to do it in writing, but writing takes longer, okay? Now, if I'm having this do this paper in stages, which is necessary, then they do it over about the last 8 weeks of the semester, all right? And I have to give them as much time as possible. So I'm having them turn it on the very last day, only 5 days before I have to report my own final grades. And yet in a typical online class, I'll have probably somewhere between 30 and 40 students. That's a lot of papers, and I have more than one online class. So by using this, I'm able to grade faster, I'm able to grade more objectively. All right, and some tips in using these rubrics for original research papers. I give feedback only at the first two draft stages. Feedback only. And because I spend a lot of time doing that, then that means I don't have to spend a lot of time when they turn in the final paper. I can just give more general comments, not as detailed. Also, I have found that it helps me bribe my students to get their drafts in. I mean, what's always the hardest thing to do is good time management, waiting to the last minute. So if I can incentivize that they get their drafts in on time, then I give some pass-fail points if they get it in on time and if they're able to meet the minimum requirements for the sections that are due at a particular draft stage. And then I give an overall score for the final paper. And this is something that took me a while to figure out. I used to give a score for each individual section, okay? And then I would add up each section, then I would come up with a total score. Problem there is that it gave me a lot less flexibility when I got to the end of the semester. I could see that Susie needed X number of points to get over the threshold for the next higher grade. So, can I give her 5 extra points so she gets over the threshold because of the paper? Yeah, it gives me that kind of flexibility. But using rubrics like this, I find, is not only a great guide for helping students through the complexities of an original research paper, doing it totally online, no face-to-face, mentoring only online, and that it makes it easier for me as well. Now let's move on to an oral presentation, and here I'm going to take an example from my 3000 level business communication course. And in this particular presentation, it's based on students each contribute a section to a group business proposal. They then record an oral presentation of their particular section and create an accompanying PowerPoint. Okay, so I'm looking at what are my program objectives for my communication program. Again, describe, apply, learn, articulate, and for this particular one I can get at objectives 2 and 3. They can apply theories of business communication to writing a proposal, and they can learn to write in the communication discipline. Now, for an oral presentation, at least the standards in speech communication are these: that a good presentation should have an introduction, 3 main points, they should be supported with research and citations, transitions between the main points to cue the audience that you're moving on to the next point, a conclusion, that they should speak extemporaneously, not reading from a manuscript, not memorizing word for word, but nor is it impromptu and totally off the cuff. Extemporaneous is you are prepared, maybe speaking off of notes, kind of like I'm doing today, huh? Professional appearance, effective use of gestures and body language, effective vocal delivery, and maintaining eye contact. But again, I've got to prioritize my learning outcomes, okay? Is it important to me that for their recording that they gather an audience and speak in front of an audience? Is it important that when they make the recording that they be standing up? Or is it okay if they sit in front of a computer screen when they record their presentation? How important is it to me that they speak extemporaneously as opposed to putting it up on their computer screen, sitting down and just reading it? At least then I'm getting the content. I mean, what's my priorities? And how do you incorporate PowerPoint? A student is trying to use the iPhone, trying to record this presentation, and trying to get PowerPoint into it is not really easy. So what's important to me? And I prioritize the outcomes like this, all right? Maybe the goal isn't that they give me a super polished presentation, but I want them to learn what are the elements of an effective oral business presentation. And so that they at least know what are the elements, and then they can work on that after graduation as they need it professionally. So I don't require that they get an audience. Again, this is a complex assignment. There just isn't enough time to get an audience and do the assignment on time. Also, there isn't time for them to figure out how to incorporate PowerPoint into some do, and I provide some suggestions, but I don't require it. They submit it separately for a separate grade. However, the grading rubric, they will lose points if they are sitting, because then they don't get points for their body language, their gestures, their professional appearance, and they lose points if they're reading. That is, they're not maintaining eye contact because they're reading something, and they're not speaking extemporaneously. So that drives then the construction of my grading rubric, and that is the front side of the second page in your handout. And for this I use a checklist approach. I simply list the elements that should be in the presentation, list them in sequence. I have a check-off box for each element. There are points for each box that is checked. Also, doing it point by point by point gives me a chance to make reference to things in the textbook that can help supplement their understanding, and then leaving space at the bottom for some comments. And some advantages to using this, and I also teach our basic course, the first year course in Elements of Public Speaking, and I use this there as well. But the advantages for me is that, again, it's faster and more objective grading. again, it's a complex assignment. There isn't time to do everything, particularly when online instructions take longer. It all has to be written. You can't explain it face to face. You can't stand up there and give examples. And so in this way, I have to give them really until the last day, 5 days before I have to report my own final grades, and I've got probably, I think this semester I have 36 students in my business communication course. So all I have to do is pull up each one and check off each box as they go along, all right? Makes it easier, makes it more objective. Couple of tips for using a rubric like this for an oral presentation. Do require that when they submit the link to their video, that they also attach a file of a written outline that you can actually print out. Because if you're listening to a student's presentation and you're trying to guess, now, is she going from point 1 to point 2, or are we still at the introduction, or it's going to be hard for you. It's better for the student, better for the student's grade, better for you to get an outline you can follow along. Also, have your students post it to YouTube. You have to find ways to economize. And I tell students, look, here's where you go on YouTube for instructions about how to upload a video. You figure it out. This is worth 80 points. And every semester, students are able to do it, no problem. Okay. Now, let's move on to a group project. And oh boy, this is the absolute most complex project you could possibly do in an online situation. Because an original research paper is an individual project. An oral presentation is an individual project. But for a group project, and I'm typically talking about 5 to 6 students, there are so many moving parts. Wow. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example from my 3000 level business communication course. Again, each student contributes a section to the group business proposal. Then the group has to coordinate the document as a whole to make it coherent, keep it all on message, and I require that they must meet as a group once a week, virtually in real time. And they can choose the technology that they want. And I get feedback from students that this actually is one of the best learning experiences they have, because they've never had to use this kind of technology for, they use it for social reasons, but they've never had to use it for professional reasons. And just as a group going through which one works best for us is a good learning experience, and then I require and give them points if they submit a weekly meeting agenda and minutes of each meeting. And it does help keep it all on track. So again, I'm looking at my program objectives, describe, apply, learn, articulate. This one can get me at objectives 2 and 3, apply theories of business communication to writing this proposal, learning to write in the business communication discipline. And a typical organization of a business proposal in our discipline would include an introduction, an overview of the client's needs, an executive summary, bulleted main points of key recommendations of the proposal, an analysis of the markets that the client needs to reach in order to achieve its objectives, an analysis of the client's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, that is, their ability to reach those markets, then a discussion of alternative solutions in order to attain the client's goals, recommendations for carrying out the highest ranked alternative solution, and then a plan for implementation, including budgets, timelines, and staffing responsibilities. But boy, I have got to prioritize my learning outcomes, all right? Do I allow students to pick their own, what kind of business they're going to have, for example? Do I let them pick the problem that they're going to, the business problem, the simulation that we're going to do? Do I let them pick the alternatives to solving the problem? Am I going to let them do their own research? Again, because this is online, because guidelines have to be written, because it all takes more time, there just isn't enough time to be able to let them do these things on their own and still be able to write an actual business proposal. So I have to balance. I actually assign them, okay, this is what business, so for this semester, for example, okay, group 1, you're a fast food franchise. Group 2, you're a coffee retailing franchise. Group 3, you're a car wash equipment distributor, okay? And then I define the problem. The problem this semester is there's a convenience store chain that's moving into South Texas. They want to have a fast food, they want to have car washes, and they want to have coffee at all of their new locations. And I'm giving you an RFP, request for proposal, for each one. I also define the alternatives. For example, is it leasing franchising, or a joint venture. And then, because students come into this, I mean, they don't already come into the class knowing about the fast food industry, about the car wash industry, about the coffee retailing industry, so I provide research leads for them so that I can leave them time to actually have the experience of working together as a group, pulling together, collaborating, building a cohesive, coherent, effective business presentation. Now, I have to admit that for this particular class that I've had to construct about a 15-page group project manual, all right? And so I describe, okay, this is your type of business. Let me describe it for you. Let me describe the client. This semester, the convenience store industry. Let me include the RFPs to which you have to respond. Now, here's step-by-step how your group develops the proposal. Here's step-by-step instructions for how you construct your particular individual section. Here's step-by-step instructions for being able to fit these sections together. And a style guide about page margins, pagination, line spacing, paragraph spacing, first and second level subheads, and all the rest. So that in this particular class, the rubric, and that's on the back side of the second page in your handout, is more of a supplement to the group project manual. The rubric includes criteria that are applicable to all the sections and criteria for evaluating the document as a whole. And the advantage of taking this approach is that there's a lot of moving parts, but I've had really, really good success with this. And students have generally been very satisfied. I mean, you've heard it a million times. Oh, I hate group projects. Oh, Dr. Ward, please, a group. But I come away, I have them write a reflection paper, a short one at the end of the semester about what they learned in the group, and I get glowing reviews. So by keeping things, okay, you've got the rubric, you've got the manual, you're required to have an agenda for your meetings, you're required to have minutes of your meetings, you're required to get together once a week, I've provided the structure. I mean, I've provided a framework in which you can succeed. And over the course of the 8 weeks that this takes, groups do a good job. But without the rubric, without the, not only as a scoring instrument, but also as a guide for online students, it wouldn't work. Couple of tips. Give not only a group score, but also give an individual score. I set this up so that each student writes one section of the proposal, and so they get a score for their section, and the group gets a score for the document as a whole. And I have found over the years that maybe a good thing to do is to make the group score pass-fail. Okay, you've worked hard, you've given me a document that has all the required sections, you've made a good faith effort, I've gotten your minutes every week, I see that you've been working hard on it, so tell you what, I'll reward your effort. I mean, how many times have you heard it? But Dr. Ward, I don't think this grade reflects my effort. No, it's mastery, not effort. But from time to time, you know, let's reward the effort so that we can maybe concentrate on the individual score. Now, I do have them turn in a draft about a month before the end of the semester of their section, and I give detailed feedback there. So that means that at the end of the semester, when, wow, I give them to the last day, I only have 5 days until I turn in my own grades, that I'm able to actually then, because I've given detailed feedback earlier at a draft stage, I'm able to use the rubric so I can just give some general comments. And again, you know, I used to break it down, but now I just give an overall score individually, and that gives me more flexibility. Also, you know, students seem to be satisfied, and again, with all of these rubrics that, okay, here's a rubric, it's down in black and white, it's fair, it's objective, I understand what's going on. Yeah, Dr. Ward, he's a hard teacher and he has high standards, but you know, he's fair, he's objective, and it works. Well, golly, I think this year we cut it from an hour presentation to a half hour, so I've been talking fast. Tried to squeeze it all in, but hooray, I think we've actually got 5 minutes left for questions, comments, and suggestions, and I see one in the back.
I got two questions. What is the general size of your groups? Because I find about 3, after 3 we get a lot of group dynamic problems. So
Okay, the question is, what is the typical size of a group for a group project? In my discipline, communication studies, one of our major subfields is group communication. And in fact, I've made presentations on how do you apply group communication theory to the design of an online course. In group communication, it's generally conceded, according to the research, that 5 or 6 is the optimum number for a group. Less than that, what if somebody drops out? Then you don't have a viable group. More than that, there's just, it's too unwieldy. So I find that, 5 or 6 is optimum, and that's what I assign. But again, it's a lot of moving parts, which is why I use the rubrics and the written instructions in order to make it work. Good question. And you had a follow-up?
Yeah, in the times when I do the group projects, I always have the students in the group be able to grade the other students' effort. Do you do anything like that?
I have done that in face-to-face versions of this course. The only way that I'm able to do that in an online course is that in my business communication class, I have them develop a resume and a cover letter, and I do a simulation where they apply for jobs that are advertised by the other groups. And so I ask the other groups, I give them a rating sheet for their resumes. But yeah, that's where you have to prioritize, outcomes. And okay, since we have to do it all in writing, since we can't do it face-to-face, since I can't explain it to you, one-on-one, then things do take longer. What do I sacrifice? What's important? But yes, peer review exercises I think are great things to do. I'd like to do more of them, and if you have suggestions about how to do that, then I'd be happy to correspond with you. All right, more questions? Yes?
You're making it, the group project, you're making it a pass-fail for the group part.
The group part. Mm-hmm.
So what's the purpose of doing it as a group? I mean, when we do a group project, the point is to bring out your weak and to have your strong step back.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's I think one of the rigors of trying to do a group project. In that essence, do you think that that's still happening? And that you're actually being able to evaluate that?
Okay, it's a good question. And again, you have to prioritize your learning outcomes, and you may come to a different conclusion than I do. I've tried it both ways, and I've generally ended up, because this project is so complex and because students perceive that it requires a great deal of effort, that this is a way to reward them. And I refer here to another theory from group communication. It's called social exchange theory. Social exchange theory suggests that people will continue to be part of a group as long as the benefits outweigh the costs. And so I try to give pass-fail assignments, not only here, but other things, little things week to week. You post something, you get some free points, so that I'm able to continue to make the benefits of staying engaged outweighing the costs of just dropping out. But yeah, I mean, that's a question I struggled with as well, and I think we all agree that it's really important today that students learn to collaborate, because when I was college age, we had what are called tall hierarchies. It comes down the chain. Ward, you do your part. You send it back up the chain. Today, with the technology, you've got to network. Students need to learn this stuff. Question?
I just want to, it's not really a question, but I wanted to add to what she said. I think it depends on the discipline too, because we come from a discipline of nursing. And so we use a lot of group projects and we use pass or fail, but our objective is not to bring out the weak or the strong. It is to learn collaboration, because in nursing you have to work together to get a job done. So it's not per se that you're grading it. You're grading, can they do that ability to come together, work together, stay in a group, and see it through to the end. So I think to that end, that's where it comes in useful for us, because we want to see, can they get along? You don't have to love each other, but you got to work together at the end of the day.
Well, I teach graduate nursing.
Right.
And so for me, I always know that there's going to be, they're so manipulative at that point where it's like, oh, she does it, man, make her the lead. Just tell me what you want later. And to me, that dynamic.
But you bring a good point, because a lot of times that happens at the graduate level.
And in work.
Right, because we've come from teaching LVNs, ADNs, MBSNs. If you don't do enough group work with them, when
Early.
they're in the baby stages.
Yeah,
When they
they
get
don't
to
know
that
how.
point, they just are used to delegation. I delegate that person to do it, and I will do it.
Yeah, and a couple of thoughts. One is, I did try to bring out that, discipline specificity. That is, you look at your own program objectives, but then you have to prioritize. But also, from communication, there's another useful theory it's called social presence theory. And for example, why is it that video conferencing is able to work? Because there's a sense that people are present, but because of the anonymity of it, and because you don't have certain social cues like I'm the boss who's sitting at the head of the table, or that you find that it democratizes. And so that is one of the advantages, I think, of the online format, and particularly for the group project, that it filters out some of these social cues and democratizes the exercise, or at least I have found that to be so in my classes. Might have time for one more quick question. Anybody? Now's your chance. Going. All right. Again, I'd love to have you contact me at wardm@uhb.edu, but thanks for your time and attention. And did everybody get a handout?